on this species of ants. And they have their little thing going on, and very cooperative. And there's this wasp that comes into their colony that ordinarily would be devoured by these ants. It's kind of like walking into a KKK rally, very much. And so what this insect does is it sprays, we believe, this hormone that makes the ants think that the other ants are their enemy. And they don't see the wasp anymore. It's not there. They don't attack it. They start really fighting each other, which to me is an amazing piece because it also speaks about black people sometimes too. It's like we are sprayed with some kind of hormone that we don't see all the dirt white folks do, but we're after each other. So there's a lot of just, I think, certainly metaphors and analogies that you can make between the world around us and ourselves, but there is some connection, and I try to figure out what that is if we can. Colony collapse disorder, the population of bees has dropped considerably, and they don't know why. And again, they don't see any dead bees, and they don't know why they're dying. But it has tremendous consequence for us because we rely on bees to pollinate plants.
When we were in Kemet, when we were on the continent, they were scientists of the cosmology, and really it's about harmony. They're trying to work within the structure of how things actually flow.
If you kill all the plants and the bees to pollinate, you have to go get some African bees to get it back in order. Because
they get African there, huh?
Yeah, they are bigger warriors. You know, aggressive
black
bees,
people.
You know, yeah, that connection, that whole idea.
Our bees are bigger and stronger.
If you bring love to the bees, then maybe the bees will flourish.
If you're trying to pollinate, and think about the pumpkins. Think about the pumpkins. Think about vegetation that we need. Okay?
Yeah.
And you're trying to pollinate massive acres of farmland. And you need massive amounts of bees. And if we say, do a different system, or have a loving system, because you think we're stressing bees out, well, you got to ask yourself, how do you measure that the bees are stressed out? How do you conclude
that they're dying?
That would suggest that maybe they haven't died before. Because one thing we're going to be looking at in this class is that there's some things that we assume is man-made problems. And if we look further down the historical record, we'll find that before we were here, these problems still existed.
Instead of just having them always deal in one thing, to do like Carter G said, rotate them.
So your rotation would be a couple of months, which means the farmer's got to pay for more bees to come through, more pay, which means that at the grocery store, our vegetation goes up. Then we get upset. So I'm just saying, there are a lot. I want us to look at all these elements and see how they're off, because there are no quote-unquote villains in the system. Bees are interesting for another reason, for a lot of reasons. One of which is who saw the movie? If you don't have a little kid, you probably did. You probably saw it. But the Bee Movie. Oh, yeah. Right? It was a cute movie. And there's a lot of good sides to that movie. And one of which is the fact that bees should not be able to fly. Because they're too fat. They're too big, their wings are too small. They physically should not be able to fly. And in fact, when they wake up in the morning, they have these little bitty tiny wings. And when they wake up in the morning, it's too cold for their bodies. And they can't just take off and fly. And so what they do is they actually essentially put their wings in neutral, and they start quickly vibrating their wing muscles, but the wings don't move yet because the wings are in neutral. So they start this vibration. And the point of this vibration inside is to warm their bodies up so they can fly. So they do this about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but you don't see any wings moving, but their body temperature is warming up to the point where it gets warm enough, then they expand their wings and they take off. Right? The other piece about bees is directionally. They fly based on where the sun is. And they identify things, and it's amazing that a bee that is literally that tiny has some sense of where the sun is. And we look at the sun, and I can't imagine they are looking at the sun, but somehow they know with regard to where their hive is, where the plants are, and where the sun is, so much so that when they come back to their hive, they don't say, there's an apricot tree about half a mile that way to the right. They do a little dance inside the hive, and they have these various dances that are essentially directional dances that tell other bees in the hive where to go. Now it's an amazing piece here because we look at it from lots of vantage points. What does sun do for us? When it warms you up, get your body circulating. What does dance do for you? How does it communicate? You know? So these are a lot of things that we'll be, I hope, exploring in much greater detail. The scientists still don't know why bees fly. There's no reason, there's no explanation. You know, the wings move really, really fast. You can sit here and flap your arms super fast and you're not going to go anywhere. So the answer is, we don't know how they fly, but they fly. And I'm glad you asked that, because part of our discussion in this class is, there's just a lot of stuff we have no idea about. And we are, at this point in time in our history, we are, as Bob Ray mentioned this, I think, a couple weeks ago, we are the most informed generation, if you will. Time in history, we have more information than humans have ever had. And there's still so much that we don't know. Questions we're going to pose. How does one view the universe influence, dictate one's theology? So, Octavia Butler, and one of her stories involves a young girl. She begins thinking about, what is God?
Oh, parable of the soul.
Yeah, so essentially she takes the Bible, puts it aside, and says, if I was to start from scratch and construct a theology or religious system, what would it be? And so I'm posing a question for us, and one of the things I want to think about is, how was that answered? Because we are given a Hosea, we're given the Bible, we're given the Quran. These are books that are so old that we don't even know who wrote them for the most. We have some general idea. You know, some things are a little clear. The Quran, we know, was the word from Prophet Muhammad. But it's just so long ago that it's just almost sealed in protective covering. Here is this book, and it has all information that answers you'd ever want to know. But and somebody had to write it. But what if you had to start from ground zero with nothing? What kind of theology would you create? And how would it be dependent upon your view of the universe? I mean, for example, if you thought the sun never moved, or if you thought the earth didn't move and the sun rotated around the earth, how would that construct your theology? If you thought maybe that the earth didn't move and the sun didn't move, it just sat there, how would that impact your theology? If you believe that, in fact, as many Europeans believed at one point, that the earth was only 6,000 years ago. In fact, there was one European who deduced that the exact date and year in which it was created. Like looking at the Bible and sipping away, looking at the genealogy. And it was, I forgot the date, it was October something. It was October something, I forget the date of the week and a year. It's amazing. It's amazing that you know for certainty. And the time, think of the time too. It was like 7:45.
Oh my goodness. The time.
Right, great detail.
Eastern Standard Time.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you thought the world was only 6,000 years old, how would that influence your theology? If you thought heaven was in the clouds, as we have done for the greater part of human history, we thought that, you know, other side of the clouds there was some castles and stuff, right? If you felt that way, how would that influence your theology? We'll talk about cycles a lot, animal life cycles, including not just animals, but planetary and galactical and the life cycles of solar systems, because everything dies. And so are we simply a part of a small life cycle from birth to teenage, adult, die, become an ancestor? Is the race a part of a life cycle? Is life on the planet a part of a life cycle? Is this planet part of a life cycle? Are we the highest life forms or simply the latest? Because there have been, over the course of the Earth's history, there have been other life forms that have existed here and are no longer here anymore. So are we the last ones? As I think that we don't articulate, but we kind of walk around assuming that we are the highest form. It makes sense that humans would write a theology that presumes that we are the last act in divine's creation. It makes sense. It's a tremendous ego, but it makes sense. I mean, if dinosaurs could write, they wouldn't write that kind of theology. What puts us in a place where we say that we are the greatest act of the Creator? We're it. I mean, that's got to be really a really myopic view of the universe to say that we're the best that could ever have been created.
Wow.
I'm just throwing some questions out that I'm looking for us to examine. A view in size. We're in this class, we're going to deal with numbers that stagger our mind.